Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamic 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Create Training Plans and Content for Your Finance and Operations Project Series, Part 1, Planning and Change Management. My name is Ross, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of Microsoft Corporation. By participating in this session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being part of a recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during and at the end of the session. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now on to the presentation. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Rachel Profitt, Senior Program Manager, Dan Ugren, Principal Group Program Manager, and Spencer Stern, Director of Customer Success. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Ross. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you might be joining us from. I am super excited for this Tech Talk series. For those of you who know me, training is my first passion. For those of you who do not know me, again, my name is Rachel Profitt. I'm a fast track solution architect based out of Denver, Colorado. I have been working with Dynamics 365 for more than 19 years now, and I've spent about 13 to 14 years of my career really focused in on training. So I'm excited to share with you today and talk a little bit more about change management and training plans for your Dynamics 365 projects. My contact information is here on the slide. I encourage you to follow me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow my blog at dynamics365lady.com. And I'll let Spencer go ahead and introduce himself.
Fantastic. Good morning, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for attending this session today. As Ross had mentioned, I'm a Director of Customer Success at Microsoft. I specifically focus on our business applications portfolio, which includes our CRM product. And I'm very focused on working with our clients to help them adopt and consume what they purchase. So one of the things that that I utilize a lot when I'm focused on adoption and consumption is putting together change management plans. I'm a certified ProSci change management practitioner, which is a leading methodology in the change management space. I've been doing change management for 13 years, and I've seen the dividends that can help drive, especially in technology projects, because with the change management side of things, we have a tendency to focus on the people, the process, the cultural side of change, which need to be enabled in order to make these technology projects successful. So as with Rachel, please feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love sharing stories and best practices around change management initiatives. Rachel, I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks. So in today's session, we're really going to be focusing on 3 primary things. We're going to talk about why training and change management are difficult and so critical to your project. We're also going to look at some examples of how resistance to change might surface in your project. And then we're going to talk about some change management techniques that you can use to improve adoption of your solution. And we'll kind of wrap up with a little bit of the beginning planning portions of, how you're going to start putting that training plan together. And then in parts 2 and 3, we're going to be diving more into the specifics around your training plan and your content development. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I love this fun reference to the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will use it. I think we can all agree that getting your users to adopt your solution is a little bit more difficult than just building a solution. And having a good, solid training plan and along with a communication plan is critical to the overall success of your implementation. Organizational change requires that employees support and participate, and significant improvement seldom happens unless employees are involved in its design and the implementation. When we look at a study of 5,400 large-scale IT projects that was done by McKinsey and Company in conjunction with the University of Oxford, they found that projects with initial budgets greater than $15 million, find that the well-known problems with IT project management were persisting. And among some of those key findings that were quoted from the report were that 17% of large IT projects go so badly that they can actually threaten the very existence of the company. And on average, large IT projects run 45% over budget and 7% over time, while delivering 56% less value than what was predicted. So when we think about this, and we start talking about different IT projects, they're notorious for their high failure rate. And in fact, it's estimated that up to 70% of technology projects fail to deliver their desired results. So once change starts to happen, people react positively if they are an integral part of creating change, or negatively if they have changed imposed upon them. And it's a natural tendency for people to resist. People like to hold on to their rituals and habits, and they avoid the new and uncertain. People need a strong reason to let go. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Spencer, who's going to talk a little bit more about resistance and how it might surface in your project.
Perfect. And thank you again, Rachel, for setting this up. So I'm going to spend about the next 20 to 25 minutes talking about the type of resistance that we see emanate during change management project, or during any type of technology project, and how we can leverage various change management tools to successfully address that. And again, I know we only have an hour here this morning. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg, if you will. And Rachel and myself will be available, for follow-up questions in the chat or even post-presentation. So what I'd like to do, if we can jump to the next slide, please, Rachel. As Rachel indicated during her introductory section, there is a natural reaction to change. And especially for adults, change has a tendency to kind of create anxiety. Oh my gosh, what I've been doing at my job for the past 10 or 15 years, it's going to change because we're getting this new technology deployed, or we're having a new leader come in, or we're having some sort of major reorganization occurring. Creating anxiety is very common when when staff are confronted with change. And there's two types of ways that anxiety manifests itself. One is direct responses, such as, saying, what, this change is not good for me. It's not good for the organization. I'm not going to get on board with this. So very much up front, okay, this person is a resistor. We need to come up with some appropriate plans to deal with that. The type of responses that are much more harder to detect are what I call kind of the indirect responses. These are people who may be resisting a change that's coming through an organization, but may not be doing it very vocally, maybe kind of behind the scenes. Maybe they're assigned tasks and they're not getting them done in a timely fashion, but they say they're getting them done. Maybe they're kind of creating some rumor mills, kind of digital, kind of the virtual water cooler, especially in this environment as opposed to the physical water cooler. But these are folks that, may be spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the initiative, but kind of doing it in a manner that is not so front and center. So, one of the key components about change management is we realize that change creates anxiety, and we try to address head on the various responses that are being put out there by employees impacted by the change. Next slide, please. So I want to just first of all state that resistance can be a good thing if it's treated and addressed properly. And I want to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive on this slide. The important thing about change management is when people are resisting, please don't be dismissive of those folks and say, oh gosh, they're such a dinosaur. They have no interest in changing anything. They're threatened by this. We can ignore them. We can move forward. There may be some people like that, but the reality is my experience I've been involved in about more than 15 large-scale technology projects that have deployed comprehensive change management plans, is I always view the people who are resisting as an opportunity to engage them. from our perspective as the project team, it sometimes really forces us to validate some of the assumptions that we put together in our overall project plan. There's a tendency when you're so close to something and working, rolling up your sleeves, putting together the timetable, the requirements, the budget, the staffing, the resources, the governance. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to step outside of that and say, gosh, how is this, project plan that we're putting together going to impact these frontline workers who are tangibly going to be impacted by the project because they're using a brand new system. So getting this different perspective from a resistor forces us as a project team to say, wait a second, it made some assumptions here around timetable, or we made an assumption here around an integration that's being built into the system, or we made an assumption about the ability of this manager to drive change in a specific division. You know what? We need to revalidate this. Maybe we didn't take things into account. And it's very important. Sometimes I've been in projects where we've gotten feedback from frontline impacted workers saying, you know what, I love my manager, but based on where they're sitting in this organization, I'm not sure that they're the right person to drive change down to us at the front line. And we had to go back and kind of reevaluate our governance structure because of that very tangible feedback. And it was fantastic feedback because we got that feedback up front. We identified this person as a resistor. Another huge benefit of resistance is that it's an indicator as to how feasible is this project, this initiative. Sometimes, again, when people are working on a project team, a program management team, sometimes there can be a little bit of a tendency for groupthink, siloed thinking, et cetera. Having somebody outside of that core team offering feedback, test us, gives us an early indication. Gosh, is this initiative going to work? And the last piece of it is resistance is about inquisitiveness. Now, there are some people who I kind of refer to as natural born resistors. They, regardless of what the initiative or the project is, they're going to be like, nope, not for me. I'm against it. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I like my old legacy-based system here. But there's other people who've really thought about the tangible impact that this project is going to have on them. And they've sat down and they've made notes and they've created a list and they say, gosh, these are my major concerns about it. And then they come back to the program management team or the change management team, if one has been developed at this point in time, and say, look, these are the serious concerns I have about how this initiative is going to impact my position, how it's going to impact my interactions with my partners, how it's going to change the interactions with my colleagues, my clients, et cetera. I have gotten significantly positive feedback from folks who have been kind of in a category of a resistor because they've taken the time to be thoughtful to give us feedback. So again, really important point to emphasize on this slide. Just because someone is resisting doesn't mean we ignore them, doesn't mean we kind of push them to the side. Engage these people because we can get significantly helpful findings from them that we can plow back into our project plan, into our program management, into our governance process to make the project more efficient, more effective, meet our timetables. Next slide, please. So what I want to focus on next is different types of resistance strategies. So we have listed on here resistance approaches, 5 different ones. And I'm going to spend the next couple slides going through these and kind of explaining a little bit what these different, approaches are, kind of putting some definitions to them. And then after I do that, the last part of my segment is going to focus on specific action steps that we as people who are kind of on the program management side or on the change management team, specific steps that we can take to address these resistance approaches that we're seeing. Next slide, please. So the first one I want to start off with is the only game in town. So this is, and as I'm saying this, hopefully you guys are thinking of colleagues or staff that may fit this category. This is a person who has been doing a specific task for a long period of time. They may be developing spreadsheets. They may be pulling data from an Access database, for example. They may be generating a specific type of weekly, daily, monthly report. This new system's coming in, and it's going to change that because the new approach coming in here, perhaps it's a cloud-based system, for example, their world's going to get rocked. So they they may have a tendency to resist because what they do and what they've been doing for a long period of time, that's their power base. Hey, go get that report from Johnny. He has that sales report that he delivers every Friday at 5 o'clock. He's the only one that knows how to, compile the data and push it out. People like that resist because they see that, oh my gosh, this new system is going to rock my world here. So that's kind of one categorization of a resistance approach. Next slide, please. The next one is what I call kind of we are the world. So this is a scenario where a person may claim, oh my gosh, our processes of what we do in this department are so unique. It's impossible to replicate this by a new system. We have customized this thing over the past 10 or 15 years. We have built all these integrations to other systems. We have our people trained on this. It's going to be physically impossible for any type of system to replicate, replace, enhance what we're doing. And because of that, we're not going to support this type of system. So again, this is just kind of another type of scenario that you may run into when you are doing your, implementing a change management plan. Next slide. Yeah, the rules. Okay, so this is something I've come across a lot, and sometimes people resist because they will say, well, you know what, the municipal code requires us to follow to do things in this manner, or this was passed by the city council, so we have to do this process with utilizing this specific approach. The best way to handle this is, first of all, research this. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit and talking about a mitigation approach, but one of the things about the rules that we need to understand, is this really a rule, or is this something that just kind of has been ingrained culturally over time, and people just kind of assume, well, you know what, this is the rule, when in fact it's just a decision that was made, perhaps by a leader, perhaps by a frontline person, and over time it just kind of manifested itself as a rule. So a very specific example that I encountered is, several years ago I was working for a municipality, and we were deploying a new CRM system and a new work order management system for their code enforcement department. And when we were working with some of the code managers and staff, we were explaining, how our new CRM system, how the new CRM system and work order management system would interact within the department. Several people chimed up and said, you know what, this is not going to work for us because this system is not compliant with, it was some sort of specific municipal code section that they cited. I mean, they were very precise in citing it. And I said, well, you know what, let's go take a look. Has anyone looked at that municipal code lately? Is that still in effect? Is that still active? And people are like, well, yeah, it is, because that's what we were told. And I go, but has anyone physically gone back and looked at the municipal code? And no one said that they raised their hand and said, no one's looked at it. So I remember they didn't have at that point all of their municipal code was fully online yet. So we literally had to go back to the library at the municipality and pull the books that were set up. So we found the code section, we found the book, and when we looked in there, lo and behold, there's nothing in the municipal code that spoke to this specific process and the way that it needed to be addressed. And these people were basically following this rule for, I think, a couple decades, and it was just something that we found out later was set up as a process by the department head at that time. And over time, it just kind of manifested itself as a rule, as part of the municipal code, when in fact it wasn't. So sorry for the digression a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of specify that a lot of times, people who may be resisting, maybe anchoring themselves on a rule, when in fact it's not a rule. Next slide. This happens a lot, analysis paralysis. So sometimes when people are resisting, they request additional analysis be done. well, who says that this is the best recommendation for us? Well, we hired this consulting firm and they specialize with these types of projects, or they work a lot with companies in our industry, or they work a lot in state and local government. They know this industry really well, and this is their recommendation. So, what sometimes people will do who are resisting, they'll be like, well, you know what, I know this other firm. Why don't we engage them? Why did you make the decision to engage firm A? Let's engage firm B here and find out what they think about this. And sometimes they may be very interested in what this firm opinion is as a subject matter expert. Other times they just want to extend the project. And their feeling is the more we can defer a project, maybe it will just go away. Maybe the funding will go away. Maybe the enthusiasm for the project will go away. Maybe the leadership, the executive sponsorship of the project will go away. So analysis paralysis is trying to kind of jam up a project by studying it to death and asking more firms to come in or more outside experts to offer their opinion on things. So that's that one. And then if we can move to the next slide. Yes, this is something that I alluded to a little bit in my introductory section, the rumor mill. So the rumor mill pre-COVID obviously was a combination of digital plus physical, rumor mill. Now it's with many of us not, still working remotely. The rumor mill sometimes is a little bit more difficult to monitor because it is happening kind of virtually. But basically what the rumor mill is someone who's interested in not kind of getting on board with the project or not getting on board with an initiative. What they try to do is they sometimes identify very maybe minor gaps in communication to say, oh gosh, this project has not been well thought out. I talked to Johnny about this, and Johnny's on the project team, and he said that this project is going to launch on December 1st, but then I talked to Jeannie, and Jeannie said it's going to launch on, October 15th. And maybe they misheard things potentially, or it is possible that the project team, that these people may not have been aligned. That's always possible. But what they're looking for is gaps in the project, gaps in communication to feed their narrative, to feed their theory that, okay, you know what, this is not a great fit for us. I'm not interested in getting on board with this thing. And it creates kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt with other people within the organization that could sometimes, cause projects to come to a halt, to come to a stop, to, stop, reevaluate, et cetera. So this is something, especially in this COVID environment, to for project management people, for change management leads, to kind of keep a pulse on, because this sort of stuff is happening maybe via emails, maybe in private social channels. It's a little bit difficult, to monitor this. So again, I'll talk about some approaches for dealing with it, but at a high level, these are the 5 different sort of categories that people who are resisting, these are the 5 different sort of approaches, categories that they typically utilize. So now what I want to do is transition to talk a little bit about how we can address these problems, how we can fix these problems about resistance. So let's, Rachel, if you can jump to the next slide, please. The way to make change impactful, make it real, make it lasting is, we need to walk our employees through the process of the change. So it's showing them a compelling reason why we need to change. This is broken. Our revenues are being impacted. Our customer satisfaction is being impacted. We're losing customers. Company A is eating our lunch now with this specific product. We're having a difficult time making decisions on staffing our team because the reports we're generating are not giving us a good idea from a resourcing perspective how many people we need. So these, it's so important to, share with people that are going to be impacted by the change, what are the benefits? What are the outcomes? And having sometimes trying to push down to the front line, owning the outcomes. That's one of the best ways to get people on board is stakeholdering, trying to push down key components, key deliverables of these projects to sometimes the lowest level, the frontline staff person, the call taker, the customer service representative, by getting their feedback and soliciting their ideas, and then translating those ideas into the project plan, saying, oh gosh, look at that. They've updated my project plan, and that's the idea that I put forward. That does so much to help, drive the outcomes and have people at the front line who are going to be impacted by the change own the outcomes. Another really important part is training and education. This is formal training, not only on the technology, for example, that is being deployed, but more informal training. People, job shadowing, for example, people stopping by each other's desks, people emailing each other with tips, doing video calls, etc. Another important component about making the change is recognition and reward. And this isn't just financial. I've done a lot of work with state and local government clients. They don't have the same sort of budget to give spot bonuses or give big raises and stuff like that. But sometimes recognition goes a long way. A note from a mayor, a note from a city manager, a note from a department director, recognition at a public, council meeting, for example. And these same things can be done in the enterprise space too. But acknowledging people who are enabling the change goes a long way to continue their support, to continue their efforts around the change initiative. And the last piece is making change part of the daily operations. If an organization is changing a lot, it just kind of becomes part of what we do. And they're used to it and they're acclimated to it, and it helps drive down the resistance significantly. Rachel, if you can move to the next slide. So some specific action steps, and I know I'm getting tight on time here. I got about 5 minutes left before I'm going to kick it back to Rachel. So I'm going to go through this a little quickly. And again, happy to participate in chat to dive deeper. Action steps. Okay, listen and understand objections. Strong listening skills are required by people at the program management team and the change management team. We need to be empathetic listeners. First, sometimes an employee just wants to talk out a change. They're not necessarily resisting, but they just need to be heard. So first, when you are listening to your employees talking about this, first seek to understand what they're going through. And then once you kind of understand that, you can put together a more tangible approach to addressing their concerns. The next piece is focus on the what instead of the how. Focus on the outcome. What needs to change and when does it need to be changed? So by focusing on the what, we can engage the employee in helping figure out the how it's going to be done. So by getting the employee to focus on the how, they are in fact creating their own change map, driving their own steps to getting them onboarded, to getting them comfortable with the change. And by doing that, they have a sense of ownership. It's like, wow, I created my own path on how I'm going to deal with this change. And they're empowered and have a higher likelihood of getting on board with the change and being successful within their new role. Removing barriers. So again, this goes back to listening and understanding objectives first. It's really important to kind of overall, communicate the overall business case and what the objectives are. Provide, reassurance. Sometimes people are worried about change because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. They're doing this change because they just want to fire a whole bunch of it. It's really important to kind of emphasize that the change is not about people losing their jobs. It's about trying to make them better at their jobs, make them more efficient, make the way they serve their customers or their staff or their partners or their colleagues more efficient, et cetera. Focus on kind of those high level objectives within an organization, as opposed to, saying, well, the only reason we're doing this is we just want to cut, 50% of our staff. That's not going to resonate well. The next one, providing choices and results. So, create a desire for people to want to be part of this change. Boundless enthusiasm is really important. Be very positive. Deal with employees as individuals, not as groups of people. Validate their concerns. Listen to them. And this goes back to the first point of listening and understanding objectives. We need to be empathetic in our role here as change managers. So the listening piece of it is critically important, and then communicate the choices, say, okay, you know what, I understand that you aren't interested, after doing a whole bunch of conversations and coaching and modeling and so on, say, if they're still not interested in getting on board, then say, maybe there's another role for you in the organization, and let the employee decide how they want to, follow through on that. The next one, create hope. This is something that I just had alluded to a little bit, boundless energy and enthusiasm, faith in the future. Change leaders, they actively work with the employees to create this positive atmosphere, to create, an atmosphere where, change is kind of part of the culture. And the last one is demonstrate the benefits. So use case studies, use testimonials. This is something that I've done a lot of work with when I'm doing changes. Sometimes, when I see people are resistant, I put them in touch with other people in similarly situated companies or organizations. Okay, you're in the revenue department at a company. You know what? I worked with another company on the revenue team, similar change. Here's a person in a similar sort of position. Let me put you in touch with them. So, use those testimonials, do these webinars, do site visits, bring in guest speakers who have gone through a similar type of change. And when people see that, oh my gosh, I see myself as that person, as a customer service representative or as a manager, as a supervisor, and wow, they were able to go through this change successfully. You know what? Maybe this isn't as challenging or as hard as I thought. So bring in, people, bring in case studies that show, hey, this isn't as hard as we think. Other quick things to do, get a personal appeal from a trusted manager. Sometimes, you want to focus on the loudest, the strongest dissenter, the person who's the most active resistor. Sometimes focus on that person first, working with them. And if you can kind of get them on board, other people may fall into line, because sometimes the only reason other people are resisting or dissenting is because they're following this one person and they're not really haven't kind of really rolled up their sleeves and understand the ins and outs of the project plan. Happy to chat about that a little bit later. Rachel, let's move to the next one. So this is, as I said, in the kind of my last bullet point. Show the real life examples. Top down is very important. Get people to attend these sessions, etc. These go a long way to help make your business case as the change management person. And I think, Rachel, I'm going to end it with the last slide. If you could jump to that, it's just a quote here. So this lady, Tara Ryan, she is the chief marketing officer at a company called Coupa. This is a company that develops savings-focused procurement software. And this is, I felt like this quote really does, a good job of kind of encompassing what change management is. Start advertising early, clearly articulate the benefits for the company, for the employees, for the clients, and be very consistent with that. So with that quote, Rachel, I'd like to turn it back to you to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Spencer. So kind of continuing on with some more tips and tricks that you can use in your project to help address the issue and kind of start transitioning a little bit to more about what are some of the training content and communication type assets that you can put together. So my first tip is keeping the technology on the employee's radar. There are several easy and inexpensive things that you can do to keep your new technology a visible topic of conversation in your company. So one example is creating a poster campaign that highlights key events in your adoption process, and start from the launch and keep that ongoing throughout the entire project and through all of your training leading up to your go live, and include helpful how-tos and those usage and success stories to help drive some of that communication, across those users. Invite your employees as well to give feedback about the new technology. Maybe you have a weekly email, or maybe you have a text, number that they can text message and send their feedback in, or you could do a poll on your internet site. You could also host lunch and learns or an ice cream social, things that provide employees with top user tips in a relaxed atmosphere for Q&A. And even though we're in kind of uncertain times with COVID, you can still do things like ice cream socials where everyone brings their own ice cream or brings their own special treat. And you can use those things as icebreakers to help get employees talking and communicating with each other. But it gives you a great platform. It's something fun and interesting that they will be interested in participating in. And again, you want to focus on that outcome. What needs to change and when does it need to change by? And by focusing on the what, it will allow staff to be involved in the how and increase ownership of that solution. So Spencer talked a little bit about recognition, but I think it's important to talk a little bit more about the employee recognition part in user adoption. There's nothing quite like a little friendly competition, in my opinion. So you can try using a competition out as a user adoption strategy to get folks engaged in your new technology. A company called Hinda Incentives that specializes in helping organizations reward performance reports that employee incentive programs typically increase the frequency of behavior that was rewarded by 22%. And it increases sales by 20% when $2,000 per employee is invested in incentives. So if you're trying to put a new sales program in place, their research indicated if you spend $2,000 per employee, your sales will increase by 20%. They also found that it helps reduce turnover by 13% compared to companies that didn't have a recognition program in place. So if you are having problems getting employees to stay, using recognition can be a great way to incentivize people to stay. And again, like Spencer said, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you're spending money on. It can be something that's a little less tangible. It could be employee of the month and you give them, the best parking spot, right outside the building. There are a lot of ways that you can incentivize and reward your employees to do their best. So when you're thinking about putting a friendly competition together, there's a lot of different ways to do this. So whether you pit an entire department against one another or allow people to compete as individuals, you'll want to set incremental, measurable goals that allow people to move up in their level of adoption. And this will help ensure the adoption process will continue after each reward has been received. A few of the ways that you can boost adoption levels include reward programs that allow individuals to get points for good behavior, login rates, and then they can spend those points at a special site that features items they can purchase using those points. Another way is using team competitions that break users into groups that meet on a monthly basis to collect and submit their best user tips, and then have judges and award-winning groups tickets to a sporting event or a dinner or movie or whatever might be relevant to that kind of group of users that you're targeting in on. A Wall of Fame is another great way to do this. So a Wall of Fame program or Employee of the Month, whatever you want to name it, is the idea that will provide visible recognition for users that have achieved the most goals, provided the most feedback, mentored the most people while adopting that new technology. There's a lot of different factors that you could use in building out that Wall of Fame. And it doesn't have to be a physical wall, it can be a virtual wall, and you can send like a monthly or quarterly email out announcing who those winners are, and use that as an opportunity to brag on those employees who are contributing and doing a great job adopting your technology. So I've got another great quote that I like. to use. And even if the technology that you're introducing is very intuitive, different departments might use it in different ways, and sharing those successful use cases between departments can help aid the speed of adoption. So, for example, a company that develops and sells medical devices originally purchased Teams video conferencing to save time and cut costs associated with their in-person customer training programs. As the word started to travel throughout the company that the training team was experiencing great results connecting with overseas customers using Microsoft Teams, other departments wanted to incorporate Teams into their goals too. From HR using it to help conduct interviews, to engineers holding daily scrums with remote workers, and more. So another great tip is to provide ongoing training opportunities, remembering that success is contagious. And when you share the success one department has had using a new technology, you increase the potential return on investment from your technology because you inspire others to use it in new ways. The next time you think about introducing new tech at your office, you can fuel its adoption momentum through a variety of training modules. So that could include things like in-person training sessions where top users share a story about how they're using the technology. You can also use online videos that teach users how to quickly use various features, especially if there's features that will make their job easier on a day-to-day basis. You can also consider using monthly communications or newsletters or emails and so on to share user tips and innovative use cases from various departments and individual users throughout the company. So when we start thinking about putting our training plan together, it's important to note that it's a journey. It's an iterative process. In our series, we're really going to focus around the training plan and the content development. And these two things have to be part of your change management plan. And planning for these tasks in your overall project plan is critical to the overall success. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about planning your training. It's important to remember that the training plan, again, is iterative and it will continue long past your first go live. And when we think about the software having a continuous update pattern now with finance and operations, we get new updates every month. You'll need to think about how your training plan will be a continuous training plan to go alongside your continuous software updates. So when we think about the different phases and steps in the journey, there are 6 basic steps. So the first one is managing the change. Again, human beings are naturally adverse to change, and a technology implementation is no different. So you have to have a change management component to your project. The most important part of user adoption is the users themselves. So start by building personas to help identify the way your main users are grouped and will interact with the system in their daily work. And this starts when you're gathering those requirements. One of the things that we often talk about from a fast track perspective is, are you gathering persona requirements? That should be part of that requirement gathering step and phase of your project. When you're gathering information about what the system needs to do, should also involve who needs to do it and what's different, about these parts of the process versus, another part of the process. And so the next step is building the foundation. So when we think about from a training perspective, and I'm not talking about the software itself, we want to do site mapping, wireframing, prototyping, and mockups that can help make sure your system is built for usability. And that might actually include mockups of the actual software, but you'll also need to think about mockups of what the training might look like, and how you're going to teach people. You can also consider launching a prototype of your training course to a small group of people to gather feedback and determine where fixes might be needed and updates to your content. Then the next step is to create a communication plan. So an effective strategic communication plan is one of the key successes to implementing a large-scale organizational initiative. If we don't tell users what's going on, what's expected of them, what's going to change, we can't expect them to just know what to do, how to react, and so on. So having a good communication and plan in place that's not only including components about what the change is, but when are they expected to go to training? What's the expectation of them when they're at a live training? Are they going to be required to, take a test or get certified? Make sure that they know so that they can be prepared, so that they can start planning for these things. And once the system is out of that kind of pilot stage, I usually recommend from a finance and operations standpoint, we typically have projects that are structured where we have a build portion of the project where we're doing all of our development. You don't want to start building your training content too early because the system's going to change. Data might not be all fully uploaded, so on and so forth. We want to wait far enough along in the project that we're not redoing a lot of work, but we want to start early enough that we've got time to adjust and tweak and make changes. You'll remember that you'll want to not just train users on how to use the system, but you'll also want to think about why the change is being implemented. There might be other business process changes that are happening that really have nothing to do with the system that may need to be incorporated into your particular solution. And when you help them understand the why, then they'll see those benefits and they're going to be more likely to take on and adopt your solution. You'll also want to think about, marketing your training programs and your new software system to the end user. So you can almost think of this as like making a miniature marketing plan and a promotional strategy for your internal staff to help them understand what those benefits are, just like you would do for products, that you're going to introduce or services that you're going to introduce out to the marketplace. Think of your internal staff as, your customer when you're trying to adopt a new technology. And once you've done all of these things, that's when you're going to start building and distributing your content. And that's really what we're going to focus in on part 3 in our series. But it's important to remember that your system is only as good as the content that you share. So developing templates and standards and making sure that the people who are developing your content have a standard and have a methodology to follow is just as important. Your contributors need to make sure that they understand that they need to keep the content up to date. And that's going to help reduce frustrations and help maintain your training and your content for your ongoing user adoption, because you're going to hire new people. People are going to move from department to department, or they're going to get promoted in your organization. And, when you go to a new department or you start a new job, one of the most frustrating things and, reasons why people oftentimes leave in that first kind of period of starting a new job is they didn't have proper training. So when we think about the learning plan development process, we're going to look at this as, that iterative cycle. So it's important to note that it's constantly evolving, and it's necessary throughout your project to reevaluate and reassess those needs if you want to have a successful implementation from a learning perspective. So you're going to start out by identifying your goals. So you want to identify the immediate and the long-term goals for each employee or each job role that's going to require training in your organization. If you haven't identified those personas and the roles in your requirement gathering, then you're going to have to go back to the business and kind of figure out who those people are, who those roles are. So that's why I always recommend starting at the beginning with that. Then you're going to create your learning plan or your learning domains. And this is, again, a living document. That first draft isn't going to be complete. You're going to keep coming back to it and updating that plan with more details. Those learning domains refer to determining the type of skill or the type of learning that will help you meet those immediate goals that you set out for. And so you'll need to map each of your training goals to a comprehensive list of courses, content, quick reference guides, documentation, whatever you'll be using to meet those training goals. And we'll talk more about how to do that and the step-by-steps along with some samples in part 2 and more in part 3. The next step is to really categorize those learning methods. And so you're going to need to identify the different content and delivery types. So this is like, are we going to do instructor-led training? Are we going to do videos? Are we going to do quick reference guides? Whatever it might be, to help us figure out how I'm going to take those goals and what that kind of the general domains or objectives of my learning are, and mapping those to different types of artifacts and content and how we're going to develop that content. And then you can actually start developing the actual content. And I think this is one of the steps that a lot of people and a lot of organizations underestimate, the amount of effort that it takes to create all of the content that's needed. In part 2 and in part 3, I'll be talking a little bit more about how much time you should estimate for putting a training plan together, as well as how much time in part 3 it takes to develop content, some good basis that you can use as an estimation technique. And then you'll need to evaluate the success, right? So once you've developed this content and you've started delivering it to your users, you need to see what worked and what didn't work and adjust. And that's one of the reasons why we suggest kind of piloting it. Just like you're testing the software, you'll need to test your training solutions as well. If you develop an e-learning course and you just publish it out there for users and no one ever tests it or validates it, you know, and users are confused or getting stuck, or maybe it's taking them in circles, or maybe you know, the Q&A in those are not, you know, accurate. That frustrates users. And when users get frustrated in a learning, especially a self-paced learning environment, they tend to just give up and stop. So it's important that you'll need to evaluate after you've kind of created that first learning plan and figure out, you know, what's next. So some do's and don'ts for your training plan. We do recommend use the business process modeler in lifecycle services to help track those business processes. If you're implementing another software solution like Dynamics 365 customer engagement applications as an example, where the business process modeler doesn't exist, you can also look at using Azure DevOps to track training. If you don't have that and you're implementing something smaller, maybe it doesn't warrant, you know, whatever your project or phase is, it doesn't warrant a full Azure DevOps project. Just use Excel or a project plan to keep track of all of those different things. When you're using Azure DevOps, make sure that you're tracking all of the training and persona requirements along with those user stories and those epics and the details of what those system requirements are. Use the task recordings feature inside of finance and operations to help record those step-by-steps for your common tasks. We'll talk more about that in part 3 as well. And use a just-in-time approach for training your users. So what that means is don't train users on something that they're going to need to do 4 months from now. If you train a user on something and you don't give them that feedback or the opportunity to use those new skills, you know, within 48 hours, they will lose 80% or more of the learnings and trainings and the information that you have provided to them. So you want to deliver that content as close to when they can start using that information as possible. A couple of things not to do. Don't wait until UAT is finished to start your planning. If you wait until UAT is finished and you're just now starting to plan and just now starting to develop content, you're going to be rushed. You're not going to have enough time before you go live to develop the right quality of content, the right amount of content for all of your business processes. Things that are standard and aren't being modified in the system can be tested as soon as they're configured. Obviously, your project plan will vary from, project to project, so you'll need to consider, what makes the most sense for your project. But you need to start early from a planning perspective. Another thing is, don't only account for a train the trainer approach in your project plan. With a lot of finance and operations projects, or large scale projects, your partner might say, oh, we're going to use a train the trainer approach. And that's fantastic. It's a perfectly fine approach. It's been used for many years. But really, if you're using a train the trainer approach, you're going to need two plans. You're going to need the plan for the partner to train those project SMEs, and you're going to need a second plan for those project SMEs to go out and train the masses, to train the end users. And both of those plans are equally important, and they're going to take time, they're going to take effort, and you need to make sure that that's all planned out in your project plan so that you are making sure that you've allowed enough time and you've got all the right resources available. We also don't recommend that you use a single type or format of training and content delivery. So don't just make task guides, don't just make videos. We'll talk more about this in part 3 when we talk about how to select the right type and format of training content. But if you make a kind of single layer or a single flavor of training, you will find that it might work really well for some of your users and it's going to fall really flat for others, because adults have different learning styles, humans in general, not just adults, but we need to make sure that we're considering all of the different types of users in our audience and the learning principles, which we're going to talk about those 8 adult learning principles in part 3. And we don't recommend that you train users or develop content without your final security in place. If you haven't finished your security, and you're training users in the system and you've given them system administration access, it's going to be confusing. It's going to be overwhelming. Make sure that the system looks like what it will look like for the users, because if it's different, people are going to be wondering, well, what is this? And they might be overwhelmed by seeing all these buttons and things on the screen that they're not going to see. And that's hard to explain in the classroom. So make sure that it's in place, but it also gives you another great way to test that your security is working before that final go live. So that wraps up what we wanted to cover today in part 1 of our series. I do encourage you to get registered for part 2 and part 3. Part 2 is happening later this week. And actually, the description on part 3 is incorrect. Both of these are incorrect. So ignore that. I'm sorry. Part 2 is happening on Thursday this week, and part 3 is happening next Tuesday, a week from today. So I do encourage you to come to those sessions. And at this point, we'll open it up for some questions. It does look like we've got a couple of questions that have come in. I don't know, Dan or Spencer, if there's a couple questions out here that we want to address that were already asked, to just kind of retouch on those.
I just published one for Spencer. I think that would be a good one for him to answer in terms of the partner's role in the resistance. What can the partner do to help with that process?
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to. This is Spencer, Rachel, Dan. I'm happy to take that question. So, great question regarding the partner role. My experience is that there needs to be a significant amount of partner engagement in the change management process. Typically, my experience has been is that when we create these change management teams, it's typically there may be like an external change management consultant, and then there are employees on the client that are part of the actual team. Every once in a while, there may actually be a member of the partner who is part of this team, or else there's a partner who is a liaison to that team. the benefit, and I like doing that. I think it's kind of a best practice to keep the partner informed of what's going on. So that's one way to engage and make them part of the team, or make them the liaison to the team, or ensure that every time there are meetings with the partner, that there is time set aside to talk about the change management, to talk about the communications planning, etc. One of the things that we've noticed with some of these software deployments is they can be very nuanced, they can be very complex. Sometimes there's very specific requirements to a client that may only be relevant to this one client, for example. So engagement with the partner who understands their software the best, whether it's the software firm or an SI partner who's doing the work, they typically have the deepest understanding of the physical software. So we need to get those folks a seat at the table here in order to create the appropriate messaging going out.
Fantastic, thank you. Another thing that I might add, from a partner standpoint and some best practices is, a lot of times the partner owns the project plan. Make sure that the project plan includes all of these other components, the change management components, the training plan components. Even if you as the partner are not responsible for delivering those, that's fine. There are many tasks probably in your project plan that you're not responsible for as the partner, but make sure that you've communicated well with the customer what their responsibilities are. So making sure that you've got all of the change management and training aspects and content development aspects in your project plan, so you can look at the overall project as a whole from one project plan. A lot of times I see people making 2 or 3 or 4 different project plans, and that becomes difficult to really manage and get a good look at, where is my project overall and are we ready to go live? Go ahead.
Hey, Rachel, I think there's one question here from Christina. It's how can the partner and the internal project leader cooperate? I actually think some of the advice that you just provided probably fits with that, but maybe if there's some additional items that you or Spencer can comment on there.
Do you want to take the first crack at that one, Rachel?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I just kind of mentioned is making sure that you've got a combined project plan. And I think communicating and having a status meeting and making sure it's clear that, what partner is responsible for and what the customer is responsible for is important. And a lot of that comes back to a very well-written statement of work. If you have a vague statement of work, and I've seen this a lot in a variety of projects, if the statement of work is vague, it's not really clear, then it's hard to hold anybody accountable for anything. So, setting expectations early in the project, I think can help with that process. I don't know, Dan or Spencer, if you have anything to add to that.
I just want to add one quick thing, and I know we're after time here, but as we're developing the project plan with the partner, please ensure that the change management does not get cut. I've seen that happen in some situations where sometimes it comes down to a budget issue, that in order to meet a client's budget, a partner will say, well, we'll just slice off X number of dollars for the change management piece. It's not, from my perspective, and hopefully we've articulated the value proposition during this presentation, I really don't view change management for tech projects as an optional piece. Make sure it's baked into the project plan, make sure there's communication between the partner, the change management consultant, and the change management team regarding these types of issues. And as I said earlier, sometimes the best practice may be to actually have someone from the partner side sitting on the change management team. That ensures that flow of communication back and forth.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Ross to wrap us up today. Again, make sure to register for parts 2 and 3, and we look forward to sharing more with you later this week and next week.
All right, thanks, Rachel. I've just posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like to get your feedback on today's session, and we welcome the input on how we did and what you'd like to see in future sessions. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today. Stay safe.